How do you remember your formulas for a upcoming test? How do you remember those theorems, those definitions, all that little things that seem so difficult to remember to apply and that, I think gives you stress when you are preparing for a test. And the reason why I wanted to make this video, because one of the most popular ways that I've always caught students cheating has been to use formulas, and they'll just write down a formula on like a little sheet of paper, and they put it in their waistband, or they put it in their up their sleeve, and they have it folded somewhere, or maybe they write it down on the back of on their calculator, or a sheet of paper in their calculator, or whatever may be the case. It's something as small and as meaningless as a formula. Students want to risk their grade and what's the word I'm thinking of? Their integrity. They want to risk their grade and their integrity and cheat for a stupid formula. Now, I think that's kind of crazy. And I do not advise you to cheat on your test, especially to try to memorize a formula or definition or theorem or something so small, right? But I do understand that a lot of students have this question because I think trying to memorize these little things that are very, very difficult sometimes to remember in the context of like what they're learning or what their test is on, that it's one of the most common questions that I get on my live stream is like, how do I remember all of this stuff? All right. So in this video, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to give you some tips and some tricks to be able to do that. However, I do have to warn you, I'm not a big fan of this kind of topic, because one thing that I found when I was a teacher was, I'm like, why are students cheating on this? And of course, like when a student cheats in my class, like that makes me upset. Right. And then I had to talk with them. I had to talk with their teacher. I had to talk with, the counselor, the principal, like it brings in this whole ordeal. And I'm like, for what? Right. It's for what? A grade. And because some stupid formula that you like are never really going to need to know in real life. And it wasn't just like within that one instance. I mean, this happened multiple times. But one thing that I decided that I wanted my class to be defined as is not for students to, if they could remember a formula or not. And so one thing I always did was I gave my students a formula sheet for every test, for every exam. I allowed them to write down anything they wanted front and back on a sheet of paper, because I did not want that stress for the students to be going through. I did not want them to fail my class for cheating for something, writing down a form and something like that. I did look at the review sheets. So there are certain things, you couldn't put on the review sheets. But in general, like I wanted them to put all those formulas and all those definitions and theorems and stuff like that, because my test was going to test if they were, or was going to measure how they could apply the information, not how well they could regurgitate the information. Okay. And I think it's even more important now that we've seen like AI, like ChatGPT, and like we've had Photomath and Mathway and like all these online apps that have come through, and like they've come through in this time where students are still like in this mindset, like they feel like they have to compete against one another by being able to memorize all this certain stuff over somebody else. And I don't want you to feel like this is the most important thing. Okay. However, I know not every teacher or every educational system is just like me. I know not everybody values the same things, or, has thing or puts the, values their education process the same way I did. Okay. So I'm not saying I'm superior or that's the way things should be done. It's pretty complex. Okay. And there's not going to be oh no. Huh. I think I still have it. There's not going to be a perfectly right or a wrong way. Let me know. I just saw, I got a note that like oh, come on. Is it still going? Hold on. I got like this weird little note that says that. So let me know, guys. Put any questions you guys have in the chat. I'll get back to it in just a second. But I got a little note that's saying like I have excellent connection. So that was a little weird. Maybe it was like a little snap process. But someone can let me know in the chat that we're still good. I'll continue my little tirade that I got into, which I got a little emotional because it's I get very I'm very opinionated on this from on there. But I'm assuming, I guess my recording's still going, so it says everything else I'm still live. Okay, well, add to broadcast. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's just keep on going with it. Now I got to remember where I was at. So cheap to memorize things, superior. I'm not superior. I'm not the best. Not the way, but the theme. So, but Oh yeah. So one thing I did want to mention is even though I did give students a cheat sheet, I said, write down whatever you want on this cheat sheet, right? Like there would always be things that students would forget or, that they would still need that they probably didn't think like they needed to have memorized, right? And that's the kind of the difficult thing about memorizing some formulas. Like, yeah, there's some like direct formulas that are being taught inside of the current class, but then there's also pieces of information that I, as a teacher, I'm just going to expect that throughout the whole course or throughout your, history of getting up to that course, you should know that information. Okay. And that would be something that I would say, even like for this, maybe you came from a different school. Maybe you didn't take a certain class. So maybe there is some piece of information if you were in my class that you would not remember, you would not know how to do that. You would need to make sure that you went through these process to be able to remember and understand that stuff. Because again, even on a cheat sheet, there's no way you can put everything on that cheat sheet. Okay. So before I get into my tips, let's go into just what I like to call cheap tricks. And the reason why I call them cheap tricks is, because they work, but they're not going to have any long lasting effect. Okay. You're going to probably remember them. Hopefully, if you do it, well or hard and you work hard enough on it. But it's not like a long-term solution. And it's not something that I'd really highly advise, for you to have. But it's something that, I think they do have some impact. And it's something that I even used to do with my students. I even do it with my daughter right now, is like just working through like flashcards, right? Just constantly going over, seeing it multiple times. And one thing I would recommend, if you are going to go down the flashcard route, and I think it's also a personality thing. I hated flashcards, but I remember like my sister loved flashcards. And so I think there might be a little bit of personality kind of trait that goes into it. But, I think that if it's something that you can do, something repetitive, and this is one thing I always like mention to students, like I'm not a bad, I don't hate flashcards. If it's something you can do consistently every single day. If you're staying up till midnight trying to do like 500 flashcards the night before, that's probably not going to be that useful. But if it's something that you do, like you do flashcards, and then every single time you're learning something new, you add them to the stack and you just keep on reviewing them. Maybe spend like 5-10 minutes every single day, just like going back through the flashcards, and maybe you have like the definitions or something else like on the other side. I can see that, that can be helpful. That can be beneficial. You're going to get that photo memory built up, and more likely than not, it's something that you're going to be remember for the test. Now, long-term, that's up for debate to see if you're going to be it. But I can probably say probably more likely not, unless you are using it or applying it, you're going to probably forget what was on those flashcards. But I think if it's something that you can build out, as throughout the course, I think it can be beneficial. The next thing, which is also like another just cheap trick, would be like writing it down, like writing down the formula like multiple times, just constantly writing it over and over and over and over again. Again, not something I would highly recommend, the night before, but usually when it comes down to cramming techniques, this is something you can do, right? If you want to memorize, I don't know, some weird formula, like write it down 10 times, right? 20 times. And I guarantee after that, you're probably going to have it ingrained in your memory for a couple of days. And therefore, then you can go ahead and apply it for running your test. The third thing is like try to bring some like analogy, right? We always say like, when you're introducing somebody or you're getting their name, right? And people forget their names. So, one thing you want to do is like kind of connect their name to something that you can remember, like, about their short jeans or like what their hair looks like, and give that a name, like, I don't know, Benny the goat, or something you can remember, something else that's easy to remember that you can relate, right? Or some kind of analogy that you can relate to that form and be like, oh yeah, that's it. Right. One thing I always remember with the sum and difference formulas for tangent, I just always remembered like the plus or minus. And that was one thing I just remembered, like the tangent has the opposite signs on their sum and difference formulas, right? And because I didn't remember the formulas, I just remember plus or minus. And then that helped me kind of recreate things back when I needed to, or when I needed to apply it. Now, that's not really the best way how I remembered it, but that's one thing that's like a little analogy, right? So if you can kind of connect it to something easier for you to remember, that can be helpful, right? So go through those formulas, go through those definitions, go through those theorems, and try like, all right, what is something easy that I know I can remember, that I can relate to this? All right. And again, if you have your test tomorrow, if you have it this week, these are all valuable techniques that I think you can use. I don't want you to rely on them. Like, so for like maybe next year, be like, all right, you know what? Everything that I just did or everything I just said, I'm not going to do it that way. Okay. I want to do something else because I want to remember the formulas, the definitions, the theorems for my next test. I don't want to be stressed out, right? Even though I wish I had Mr. McLogan because he would give me a formula sheet and my teacher doesn't. Sorry, teachers, don't want to throw you under the bus. But like, what are some ways that I can remember and actually remember what exactly I am doing? And the first way, which I think is the most important way, it just comes down to learning, guys. Like doing enough problems with those techniques, right? And this kind of gets into like the writing the problem down, but like, what's the point of writing a problem down like 20 times? Like, that's just a complete waste of time. Like, you're just doing it to trick your brain to remember it, so therefore you can take it on the test. I always tell students, I don't want you memorizing anything in my class, right? It's all about your applying. But there will be things that I will expect you to be able to bring back, like for you to recall in this class. But the only way that you should be able to recall this work is because you have done this over and over and over. So for instance, students would always be like, do we have to memorize the unit circle? Like, how am I going to memorize this? There's so many points on the unit circle. I was like, no. We're not memorizing the unit circle. I mean, obviously, if like you want to go through, the last 3 tips and you want to memorize it, like, you do you. I don't advise it at all. That is a complete waste of your time as well as your brain capacity to be able to do that. What I want you to do is to do every single problem that I ask you to do in this class on the unit circle, because I guarantee you, if you do every problem that I'm asking you to do, you will know how to evaluate the unit circle and you will know all the values on the unit circle. Because I think a lot of times what students want to do, and this is what I did as a student, is they want to do shortcuts, right? They don't actually want to, go through the process of doing each and every one of the works. It's like they want to be able to, they know how to do it. Okay, now let me go and finish my work like as quickly as possible and not have to like go through the same process. And that's the problem, guys. If you go through that process of evaluating your circle, of finding the coordinate points over and over and over, 1, you will get faster on it. And then 2, there's no way that you're going to forget, oh crap, what was pi over 3? Is that the same thing as pi over 6? Like, no. You're going to like, was it square root of 3 or 2 or 1/2? Like, no, if you do enough problems, then you are going to be prepared. Now, I know not every teacher maybe has like enough problems set up for you to be able to remember or have like a good, confidence in being able to remember the material. But everybody's going to be a little bit different in that regard. So I would just challenge you to practice whatever formula that you are trying to remember. Make sure you've gone through enough application problems with that, right? If you're trying to, remember whatever certain formula, like, do enough problems. So therefore you're, it's kind of going through the same process. You're writing down the formula, but you are applying the formula. And that's where those connections are going to, help you remember things, is not just the, I remember writing it down, but you remember applying the formula and how you applied the formula. Another thing that I would go through is, when I would teach every single year, I'd always forget all of my identities. Like, most of the identities I'd always forget. But once I would teach it, and you got to think as like a classroom teacher, like when you teach like 6 class periods, right? Or 8 class periods a day, depending on what it was, like I'm constantly going through doing all of those problems. By the next day, once I've just refreshed my memory of that, like I've done so many problems already, like I remembered everything. Like I never had to look at the book and reference anything. Like, nope, I remember it was from the brain because I had went through that many problems. And I always challenge students. I said, once you do as many problems as I do, you're not going to have to be worried, like, do I remember what the formula is or not? Like, it's ingrained in you because you have put in the work. So a lot of times students say, when NWER students ask me like, hey, how do I memorize? I like, the most common response is say, put in the work. Put in the work. Do the problem enough times that you have it memorized. Like, do problems by applying it, and you will not have to worry about trying to memorize the information. The next thing I would highly recommend you do is create a cheat sheet. Who cares if your teacher says you can't use this on your test, right? But one thing I told my students to do is I said, create a cheat sheet every test, and then create a cheat sheet for your semester exam, then create a cheat sheet for your final exam. And if you think about that, one thing, what you're doing is, obviously, let's just say there's like some really important formulas and stuff like that. But every single time that you write a formula down on your cheat sheet, and then when you use your cheat sheet to study, so 1, you're writing it down from like your notes or whatever, you're putting on the cheat sheet, right? That's like writing it down twice. Then usually we use our cheat sheet to study. So you're reviewing, you're doing that visual memory of your formula when you are studying. And then let's say you come into your semester exam. So then you're going to rewrite it. So again, that's the 4th time. You're going to study again for it. That's the 5th time. And And then obviously you're coming to your studying for your final exam, which would be like the 6th time or the 7th time. And obviously any other time that you need to reference that cheat sheet, it's going to be more and more time. Now, again, I like my biggest my biggest advice to students was if you create a quality cheat sheet, you don't need to use it on your test. And this is the one thing that a lot of students never really understood about the cheat sheet. They always thought like I was such a nice teacher for giving them a cheat sheet. And it was the farthest thing from the truth. I didn't give them a cheat sheet because I wanted them to cheat. I kind of liked calling it a cheat sheet because it kind of gave them this false thought of like, oh, Mr. McLogan's letting me cheat on their test. But no, I wasn't letting them cheat on their test, because if they put in the work, which when they created their cheat sheet, they are doing, they're not referencing that cheat sheet. And again, a lot of times my test would be, again, it's application based, right? So it's not just like recall, like, what is this formula? And then like, oh, the answer is right here on my cheat sheet. Like, no, that's not that easy. But then the other thing is like, it was like time based. Like if they're spending their time trying to learn the stuff from the cheat sheet and apply it for on their test, they're not going to remember, like they're not going to have time to finish their test. Right. So it was kind of like this false prophecy of like, oh, I'm going to be able to cheat. Like, no, no, no. I want you to put in your time creating that cheat sheet. And I can tell you time and time again, students be like, Mr. McLogan, I spent hours and hours creating this cheat sheet. And I looked at it like once. And I'm like, yes, that's like, like that's just like music to my ears. I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted you to do. And that's what I think the power of having a cheat sheet is. It's like you put so much time into it. It's like you are ready and prepared for that test. And what it also like kind of removes that anxiety, for you taking the test. And I never saw students that didn't want to prepare for my test did just as well as they would have when I didn't give a cheat sheet. Students that were prepared for my test did just as well as they would with the cheat sheet. So I think it benefited students and it didn't benefit the other students, right? So I don't, it wasn't one of those overall great things, but if like your teacher doesn't allow you to take the cheat sheet, like that's fine. I didn't do that for 10 out of my 14 years that I was a teacher. But it was something that I realized like allowing students to do, it helped out a lot of students that kind of dealt with the stress and the anxiety, but it didn't overall like change their grade immensely. Okay. I think it was beneficial. Now, the last thing that I give to you, I remember when I was in college, this is the first time I had this. I was struggling with physics. I was about to fail, I think. Actually, well, I did drop the class before I officially failed the class. But one of the things, I could not remember my physics formulas. I was like, I was taking Calc 2 at the time, and it was calc-based physics, and I was just overwhelmed with all my studies. And I think I was trying to do like the cheap tricks, just trying to memorize the formulas, and didn't really understand how to apply them. And I remember I sat next to one of my friends like throughout the class, and I asked him like, "How do you remember like your formulas? How do you know which formula to use and stuff like that?" Like he always knew exactly which one to apply. He always remembered the formulas like right on cue. And he's like, "I don't remember the formulas. I just remember how to build them." And it was something that was very, very important. It wasn't until I had a better understanding of math, which I probably didn't have at that time, at least for the understanding the physics of like, I was just learning math again, still to just regurgitate it, right? But he had a better understanding, like he was a better math student than I was, of like the connections in the formulas and what we were doing. And like, so when the professor would teach us those things, like he took those, um, he, you know, he took those and hung on to them, right? Because what was powerful important is like he saw how the formulas were connected to one each other. He understood how we could build out those formulas. So then rather trying to, for instance, understand like, let's say 4 formulas, if he could remember one formula and then learn how to build out to create the other formulas, well, again, you just memorize, one thing to worry about. And then from there, you could create 4 other formulas. And I was like, that's a great trick. That's a great hack. And one thing, and again, that comes on to me in trigonometry, like is, going into your like Pythagorean identities, right? If you remember like a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? You can get the a squared plus, or you can do the sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1 squared. Like you can create it by using that unit circle. And then you can go and get the, you can get the one with the tangent squared as well as with the cosecant squared. And I'm like, holy crap. Like that is, sine squared plus tangent squared equals cosecant squared, right? Or secant squared, sorry. And then 1 plus cotangent equals secant squared. I'm like, this is amazing. Like you can easily build those out without having to memorize all of them. Because I feel like if you try to memorize like all of them or do whatever, even the techniques that I have from here, it can just be overwhelming for you, right? And it can take up so much space. So it's not going to be possible for every single formula or theorem or technique, but look for things that you can build out. Look for things that you can go and build out, or combine with other formulas and theorems. So therefore, you don't have to. Therefore, you can create them when you need them, but you don't always have to have them right at your tip. So hopefully, all these techniques that I've mentioned, even the cheap ones and the ones tried and true, you can use them for this exam or test that you have coming up, or apply them for next year. So wish you guys all the best of luck on your test or exam, and let me know how you guys do down below. So